Hi, folks, and welcome to another episode of the Leadership Tales podcast. Joined today by a lady called Emma Weber. I call her Em. That's how she likes to be known. So Em is an old friend now, and we've connected a number of times around a product called Coach M that she uses. You'll hear about it today. Coach M is think chatbot, think coaching, embedding, think learning, an embedding of learning in there. And again, she's doing some great work around the concept of learning, how we embed learning through application, but also reflection. So you'll hear today about that tool, but you'll also hear just a real taste of her thinking, which is amazing. Met her recently when she was across from Australia in the UK. We sat and we riffed off a number of topics around learning and thinking and growth and individual growth. And yeah, she's a fascinating lady. So looking forward to hearing your feedback. Em Weber. Hey, Em, welcome. How are you?
I'm great. Really great.
Good to see you on the Leadership Tales podcast and see you and hear you. For those listening, yeah, you can listen in, but it's great to see you as well. It'd be lovely just to do a quick introduction for the listeners about who you are. I mean, in theory, they know who I am at the moment, but who are you?
Who am I? Great question to kick us off. So, Colin, lovely to be speaking with you and sharing with your listeners. I would say I am a business owner based in Sydney, Australia. I've been living here 20 years, originally from the UK, and I work in the space of learning. And I think of myself as a very lucky person.
Hey, and we've got a bit of a serendipitous piece because your family is just over the hill from me here, which we didn't realize. And then you'd worked with one of my colleagues, bizarrely, when we first got connected.
It's a small world.
It is.
Sydney to the UK, it's a small world.
And you've got a fascinating background and a fascinating journey. And one of the reasons that we connected so well is because of the passion and the depth of our thinking and our work around learning. So maybe tell people about what you do as a business, and then we can start to talk about how you got there, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So our specialism as a business is turning learning into action, which is helping people implement what they've learned as part of a learning program or training intervention. For me, though, that is really about behavioural change and making a difference through learning. So helping people learn and grow, but really having that make an impact on the business or the organisation or the society even that they're operating in. So impact is the key for me, and it's through that real challenge that we all have, whether it's a book we're reading, a podcast we're listening to, or a training program we can be part of, that we go through a learning experience, we're inspired and we're motivated. But how do we actually ensure that the things that we've learned don't just stay as the knowledge, they become behavioural change?
I love that. And I think that, the awards that we've won in the past working with clients around this leadership and this moving the dial on behavior, the piece for me is you can have an amazing program, can't you? You can go in, you can do a fantastic workshop. We can use our actors. And it is a brilliant experience. It's nothing against the actors or the facilitators, the consultants. But the learning or the amount of knowledge retention afterwards is very minimal. And we need to keep bringing ourselves back to it unless there's a retention strategy afterwards. For those who don't know, what is that about? Yeah.
Well, and I think it goes beyond retention because retention, we often think about it still being about the knowledge and the learning, whereas actually we need to shift it from that information to application and behaviour change. And speaking of awards, Colin, if I may jump in there, we've just actually been awarded 2 Gold Brandon Hall Awards for some work that we've been doing in EDI, Equity, Diversity and Inclusion. And if ever there's a program that has the danger of remaining theoretical and about the knowledge, because of the level to which it is confronting, to really be able to take that work and ensure that that is translated into behaviour change has just been such an honour to be working in that space. So really the approach that we take in terms of creating behavioural change it's kind of program or topic agnostic, which is why it's more a methodology than either content or information.
And it's for me, when I first explored, because the tool that I love that you have is Coach M, which is, and you better describe it because I'll get it wrong, but it's this ability to finish a course and then an automated system, whether through Microsoft Teams, other chat functions, you can start to book up some sort of conversation, which feels amazingly, it feels like a real conversation, like you're having a chat with somebody on an app, which, WhatsApp I'm addicted to. That's how I do most of my communication, but it feels like a normal chat. And you described it as a coffee conversation, but just if you can tell us a bit more about how that works, because I think people have just gone, D&I, I've got to do this in our business. What is it? How did you win the award? Yeah. And then secondly, what did you use to win the award? Yeah.
The interesting thing about Coach M, who we consider to be a member of the team, but we're getting to sticky water then with, AI and chatbots and to what level do they really understand? Modeled on the work that our fabulous human team has been doing over, as I say, I've been in business 20 years now, and we've been working across 12 countries, 16 languages. We had built up the experience of these learning transfer conversations. So we really understood the structure of the conversation, the patterns that occur in these conversations. And human conversations are 30 minutes at a time. So it's very short, sharp, focused. And we took all of this knowledge and we started playing around with the flow of a chatbot. And we really did it almost to prove that it couldn't be done, because it seems such a ridiculous concept to me, particularly. I'm very much a people person. I've been known as a coaching snob for my purist approach to coaching, and the idea that a chatbot could coach in a way even similar to a human just seemed really odd. And one day I was having a meeting with a client. We had finished the meeting and we were just in the part of the meeting where you're having your coffee and you're having fun and having a chit chat. And I said, have a look at this thing we've been, playing around with and experimenting with. And the client said, oh, I want it. And I said, my answer was, really?
Honestly, that?
Which obviously from a business development viewpoint, Colin, it's not your best selling technique.
No.
And I just said, really? Do you really think people would talk to this? And the client, Marie Daniels, fabulous woman, she said, yes, I think they will. We need to try it. And so the first few projects we were involved in, it was really the clients plying it out of our hands more than us saying, hey, we've got this great tool. It's like, really? Do we really think this is going to work? And the fascinating thing is that it does. And some people say, they prefer talking with Coach M than a human because they open up more, because they know they can't be judged. So it's that high level of psychological safety, which we talk about a lot in the space of leadership. But it's been an absolutely fascinating journey over the last 5 years to keep refining, to keep improving. And Colin, we're just about to put, we've got a new version out with kind of flexible number of action plans, goals that can be revisited. I hatched a new idea at the weekend of combining some human and Coach M.
Shouldn't do that. Come on, no. We talked about that.
That's what the team say. Emma, no more new ideas. And to loop us back round to the EDI, it was a fabulous project to be involved. It was actually in the UK with the Royal Institute of British Architecture. And one of the fabulous things that was a real combination of human and technology, in that across the whole organisation, the staff worked with Coach M, the senior leadership team worked with one of our team, and the mid-level managers worked with a combination of Coach M and one of our team. So you had that real mix across the organisation of just giving everyone the opportunity to really focus, not only go through that. We use this cultural intelligence tool. If you're not familiar with that, it's called CQ out of the US, done in partnership with the Unheard Voice, Marsha Ramroop. Just amazing, an absolute privilege to be involved. So, yeah, delighted with the recognition that the program has received, but also for the work that we did with all the people involved, because you're really challenging people to consider their actions and consider what they can do differently in that space.
And the simple things, and the simple things about coaching when I was going through it, which are some of the rigor and discipline about coaching, things like the scaling. So asking the question out of 10, how do you feel you're doing on this topic? And then the gap analysis. So firstly, what got you to your 6 out of 10, for example, and therefore what would get you to the next 8, 9 is one thing. So I really like that. And I think for me, it's a bit like the habit tracker, James Clear's work. It gives you some measurements and some stats to be able to work towards. But once you've scaled, and Michael Bungisani, a good friend, would talk about, he uses a lot of scaling questions to open up workshops, webinars, whatever else. 1 to 7, where are you? But what I loved about it is when you come back in for your next chat, you've got the data, and it's referencing that data, it's referencing your thoughts. And the more I look at, there's a tool out there called Cultivate, which is a coaching AI piece, which starts to measure almost what you're doing as a coach and how you're integrated, to the point that it recognizes in the emails. This is my limited understanding of it. Recognizes in emails the tone, the amount of times you're appreciating others, the amount of times you are recognizing and rewarding in words their contributions. But because Coach M, as you say, it's got psychological safety, it's that ability to just sit in that moment with a coffee on your phone and go, I only scored myself 6 out of 10. Where am I? And it could be that realization you're at 6. It could be I've moved to 8. But it's the hard facts afterwards which says, so what got you to it? What is the learning, the application, to use your words, that you've done since, which I love. Yeah. And
one of the reasons, again, that we started in this space around experimentation was I was always saying to my human team, remember, it's not about you forming a relationship with the participant. It's about you helping the participant, or the learner in our cases, build that relationship with themselves. And it really is about helping that individual get underneath their thoughts, feelings, values, beliefs, fears, and needs, which we know are what controls our behaviors, to then help people move forward. And there's a lot of talk about social learning and, group learning, and I love that. And it's not that I think people shouldn't be interacting, but to some level, to build those relationships, you have to have a healthy relationship with yourself, and you have to be able to have those internal reflections that will help you move forward. So for me, I think it's a real contributor in the space of leadership, of helping people build that reflection muscle. Because we're so busy, because we, rarely take the time to slow down and think and plan things through. It's almost like a online journaling tool that helps you think through problems that you're looking to solve or actions that you're moving forward with.
And, just building on that point, because I love that, just my meditation practice in the morning, when I'm in that mode, the 3 things are warmth, light, which sets me in the right mood. But I've actually started to add a couple of things. One is self-love, and the second is compassion. So self-love is, so how well am I doing in my own self-love? Yeah. Which might sound, for some people listening, woo, but actually, for me, it goes, so how much am I giving myself the love before I can do the compassion to others and the leadership to others? But scaling that would be even better. Where am I in that mode? Because, as you say, you can't tickle yourself, we describe. You can't tickle yourself, but that gives you that scaling bit. And then it says, so what? So what are you going to do? What are you going to do as actions to take? And the thing I love about the meditation space, which is a bit like the Coach M, because you're by yourself with a coffee, is that it gives you that reflection time, which, as my friend Jamie Smart would say, is the most underutilized skill in leadership is reflection time. Yeah. So when you get to that, and then there is this bit which I love, which is also, if you don't want to talk to the non-human member of your team, you can go to a human member of the team. I'm interested in seeing how many people go to that option, because that almost, as a person at a Scottish Presbyterian goes, no, I've got to stick with this, I've got to. But some people do like to go and talk to a human. Yeah.
So they do, but not very often.
Interesting.
So, and I think it's partly how we frame it. So at the moment, it's almost if you're in on our new idea.
Are you allowed to tell us about it?
At the moment, it's you say rescue if you want to reach out to a person.
Yep.
And we will, check in, find out how we can support that person. And sometimes in the old days, people would say rescue, I need to change the time of my learning break, where you can just say change or book, and you don't need a person for that. Yes. But what we're actually doing is, for some organizations now, really packaging up human coaching within that. And instead of rescue, the command is going to be get coach. And what actually happens is then the person says, right, I'm in this country. I would ideally like coaching this week, the next couple of weeks, or this month. And then either they either nominate a coach if they've worked with someone on the team before, or they, and have a link to the diary, etc. And they put a title of what really they want the coaching support about. And the coach, of course, then has access to the conversations also that they've had with Coach M. So they have the summary. So we've already have projects where we have coaches involved in a more linear, more structured fashion. So you might have one learning break, one coaching conversation, a learning break, the learning break being with Coach M. When you grab your coffee, you grab your mobile phone, sit and have your chat with Coach M. But this Get Coach, it will be used much more for people's development. And it may be that they have, worked with Coach M for 12 months, and within that have 4 coaching sessions. One of my real passions, Colin, and how we even came to start the business is I had my first career in retail, buying and merchandising. Worked for Debenhams Next, which many of your British listeners will be familiar with. Started my graduate traineeship in Phoenix of Bond Street, beautiful store.
There's nostalgia for you, yeah.
Retail was my first love, my first passion. And I was working at Freeman's Home Shopping down in Stockwell. And I attended a manager as coach program. And it was as if on that day, the whole world changed. And I can remember the first coaching conversation I ever had with someone. I remember where I was sat. I can remember the topic of the conversation. And I just thought, wow, I love this way of being in the world. And that was the catalyst for my move 3 years later to Australia and choosing to start essentially a coaching-based business, which we have honed our methodology to support learning. But that essence of coaching stays with us and is absolutely at the core.
I think what I love about that is because my first gig was in this industry was coaching for Standard Life. And I remember that I walked in, that was my first ever training session, but I had to stand on the stage as if I'd done that for years because I was being paid. I remember about 4 years later, a client friend who suddenly realized I told her the story that was my first gig and never done coaching, training and everything. And she absolutely lost it. Said, "Can't believe you did." I did. But it was that piece that I still resonate to that as well. But what's fascinating to me is we've both gone the same journey, and Michael Stein has done the same. Which is, how do you simplify the coach and the coaching to allow people to see this not as an imposition, not as something I have to do, but something that releases individuals and potential in others. And keeping it simple for me is the most difficult thing within the coaching piece. Yeah.
And also, I think there's a narrative around coaching. I was having a fascinating conversation with a colleague in the US the other day from the Learning and Development Accelerator Conference, and we were talking about the narrative around coaching And why is it people think, I don't need a coach? Least of all, I need a chatbot as a coach. And is it particularly at the senior levels that people feel that? We were questioning, we were, having a discussion as opposed to saying this is exactly how it happens. But I think one of the things is, for me, as we touched on earlier, that actually the coaching is as good as we can slow down and reflect and open up to ourselves. And so in some ways, if we're saying, I don't need a coach or I don't want a coach, it's like, I don't want to open up to myself. I don't want to understand, what's happening, either moving myself forward or not. It may be that people are, kind of past working with a coach and have already done that and are, on their level. I still work, with coaches supporting me in my business and on my journey. So Colin, to loop back round, one of the things I think about our transition now as we're going into Coach M and Coach M combining back really integrated in a flexible way with a human approach is that we're going to see that it's using a lot more for kind of someone's development journey across a year, as opposed to just a development journey across kind of essentially, which for us is typically 12 weeks. Where someone is implementing learning from a specific learning initiative that they've been part of. And that's partly recognizing the nature and the way that learning is changing at the moment, that we are needing to learn continuously. And we're seeing a lot more of kind of, a 6-month learning journey or a 9-month learning journey, and really making sure that doesn't just become about practice. Because a lot of the time, I think in learning, when we talk about behavioral change, sorry, tangent alert, Colin. I'm taking this on a tangent, but I think it's useful.
Great. Tangents are allowed. We call it squirreling. Yep. So we're allowed to squirrel. Yep.
Good. That we think if I practice a skill, I'm changing my behavior. But actually, there's a phase in between practicing and then deciding to adopt it as part of who we are and how we show up as a leader.
Yeah.
And what I'm seeing in learning at the moment is a lot of, in those 6 to 9 month journeys, people are focusing on the practicing and building the skill, but not actually getting people to that point where they say, hang on a second, I'm going to make a commitment to actually adopt this into my leadership behaviors, into my way, into my role, into the way I show up in the world. So I think there's something to be said for that.
I think looping back into what you said about the senior leadership, because I think what we're talking about here is identity. So I'm with you. There's a skill, but if you actually look at, James Clear's work again, but a lot of the work we're doing at the moment, unless you're clear in the journey you're taking as a leadership to a new identity.
Yes.
And again, I'm listening to Stephen M.R. Covey's book, Trust and Inspire. And what he talks is command and control. A lot of senior leaders are used to command and control. And that, I've got something in my business at the moment that I sense at the moment that some people are not willing to speak up in the business. I've had this feedback. Now I'm trying to work out why. But if I am not adopting or adapting my identity to be more of a coach, to practice and then see it as part of my identity, then it won't live. It's just something I do to say, I coach, but I'm not a coach. I'm working in there. And I think this is the senior leadership issue. We were chatting about it with a client last week, is I think at the senior level, why does development and training not work? Because the more senior you get, in theory, the more you fear opening up and the risk you take about opening up. But I actually love, going back to just one thing you said, and I'll come back to you, is we struggle to open up to others in psychological safety. But if we're struggling to open up to ourselves about ourselves, that double whammy at a senior leadership is all the insecurity they need to say, yeah, I'm not going to coach, I'm not going to change. Yeah.
And I think there's so much confusion around the word coach.
Yeah.
As to what does it truly mean. And it is so broad, and there's so many different ways you can show up and coach and be a coach. And people, whether it's particularly in Australia or whether it's around the world as well, but sporting coaches, when you say the word coach, people think first and foremost of a sporting coach, of someone, correcting you your golf swing or your tennis swing, or you're on your football. And I mean Aussie rules here, not soccer.
Yeah, and for those listening in America, that's soccer or American football. Yeah,
Rugby.
we've got to translate globally here.
So I think there's something about the definition of coaching, but also there's a realistic acknowledgement around the command and control, leadership style, which we know we're moving away from, and we see organizations shifting towards more of a coaching style. But I think there needs to be acknowledgement that humans, just as we are, certainty and control to such a large extent makes our lives easier.
Yeah.
And then there's the balance of but wanting the kind of the adventure and the change and the challenge to keep things interesting. And so, letting go of the control, I think that has to be a lifelong game for everyone, surely.
And I do think this is where, coming back to Coach M, it does help. Tools like it, are good because, as you say, the self-reflection, the letting go, but that need for, everybody wants certainty. I'd love to be able to predict my income for the business and be able to make decisions, but I can't, I'd like to be able to predict how my daughters grow up. I can't, all of those things. And when it comes back to it, it comes back to this piece where coaching, the broad definition of coaching, the pain point that people have that they want coaching on, sometimes they don't know who to go to. And also the leader, I don't think, knows how to flow in that conversation when they get into it. So what's prompting in my mind, and this is an exploration in my mind, is that Coach M and tools like it, if you gave it to the direct reports and the employees to coach themselves on learning and tracking, plus you have the leaders involved and working, then you've got a self-sustaining system, which I'd never thought about before because I'd always thought about Coach M as an end of a program to develop. But there's an opportunity for me in my mind. And it goes back to DE&I, goes back to own development, goes back to psychological safety. So I love your new ideas. Yeah.
And what I'm finding when we work with someone that has had conversations with Coach M, often you can go in deeper quicker because they've already done some of the basic reflection and basic sort of thinking through the situation themselves. So then when the conversation is supported in a human way, you can actually then kind of really laser in to the kernel that's, at the heart of that challenge or opportunity.
Yeah. And, using the sporting analogy, there's a lot going on at the moment, but cultural architects is one I was picking up the other day, where people are coming in who are cultural architects. But if you take the sporting analogy, doing your own work as an individual coming into the organization, doing your own learning, your own development, and bringing that to the team without needing to have your line manager telling you about it is a cultural architect. And we've got a few people who are already doing their own work who come in and made a massive difference to us. But from the sporting analogy, football, that's where I got the idea, because people who would train to a certain extent would go into the gym before they started a training session individually. They'd do their own work to warm up. I think there's a good analogy there into the business about individually what you expect of people who work in a business to do their own work so they come with a different mindset and readiness to go deeper when they get into the main team. Yeah, I love that. So tell me a bit about how you organize this, because leadership, you're talking coaching, you're talking Coach M. You beautifully said you've got your human team and then you've got Coach M as being part of it. So what's it like to run a business in this space, in the technology and other space at the moment?
It's never a dull moment. And I'm very, very grateful we have amazing tech partners that we work with. I think the tech space is so interesting at the moment in terms of, ethics and privacy and the complexity alone in that part of the business. I'm delighted that we work with our tech partners out of the US. I have a fully virtual business. And many people I've been working with for a number of years I've never met. And I love that.
Yeah.
I love that the team connect. And if, someone's going on holiday to France, they'll connect in with our coach in France. If someone's, going to the Netherlands, they'll connect in with the team member in the Netherlands. And certainly at the very beginning of the pandemic, when things shifted to a lot of virtual working, we were running quite a few information sessions about how do you run a fully virtual team, because we had been doing that for years and didn't know that it was going to kind of be needed as a thing. And so sharing some of the tools that we use around the pulse check in our meetings, the grateful glad, the way that we intentionally build culture, because we don't have the water cooler chats. We don't catch up off chance in the lunchroom. That's all the things that make building this business fun.
Tell me about Grateful Glad. And then people are going to be listening.
Grateful Glad. Well, it always used to be Glad, and then the fabulous Pat on our team suggested we make it a Grateful Glad. We always close off our meetings with what's one thing you're grateful or glad about. It can be business, it can be that day, it can be family. It's just always a beautiful way to close a meeting.
Love that. And we could talk for ages, and I'm going to welcome you back on, I'm sure, at another point, and let's chat more. And today, what I've loved about this is it's a focus on Coach M, it's a focus on technology, it's a focus on embedding, but it's also where we sometimes squirrel off in how does an individual start to learn, and you remember the spiral diagrams we were drawing when we were together, go into this piece where they are starting to have enlightenment for themselves as an individual and then go into leadership. So I want to just take it back into a question just to finish with. It's asking everybody as a new part to this podcast, but it's, if you had to pick one experiment that you've done in your life that has been successful, had a risk to it, but you tried it and it made the biggest impact on you, what would it be?
Well, we've already touched on how Coach M was a true experiment in the beginning and continues to have experimentation at its heart. So I'm not going to use that one, Colin. I'm going to use a little known fact to people. When I moved to Australia 20 years ago this year, I'd lived in the Middle East for 18 months, which in Kuwait, which was a little bit tough. So when I moved here as an experiment. And I moved here when I was really starting on my personal growth journey. And I'd learned a lot of things, but living in London, working for an organization, I thought if I stay in London and I try and start my own business, I'm going to be tempted back if someone offers me a nice salary and a fast car as part of the package.
Yep.
So I thought I'll go somewhere where no one knows me and experiment with what I'm learning on my personal growth journey. Experiment with setting my vibe each day, experiment with setting my intentions. And I thought I'll come here for a year, and if it goes horribly wrong, I'll go back home and I'll just pretend I was traveling. And 20 years later, the experiment is still an experiment. No, it's not. I'm fully settled, just in case my partner listens into this.
Yeah.
It's no longer an experiment, but I did move to Australia in an experiment, and the deal with my family was that if I wasn't having fun and I wasn't enjoying it, I would go back home. But I literally moved here to reinvent just a way of working, way of being, starting my own business and working with my kind of coaching skills and the growth skills that I'd worked on. So
I love that, because it's, there's a big thing about cultural behavior change, and part of it is about the environment. And I love the fact, when James Clear talks about the Marines in the war who had addiction to heroin, they thought everybody, once they came back from Vietnam, would be still addicted, but the environment had changed. So getting your environment, moving to a different postcode, zip code, and then finding that space. I love that. And I love the words getting your vibe right as well. So that's, I love that word. I'm going to remember. I keep remembering that word, and he's getting my vibe. Love that. And to know you did it. It's been a real pleasure, always is, to chat to you. I'd love to welcome you back on again. But if people want to find you, find more about Coach M and other pieces, where would they go to? Yeah.
transferoflearning.com. So transferoflearning.com, or very welcome to connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm quite active on LinkedIn. So it's lovely to chat with you, Colin. And fascinating just to explore today.
Good. Thank you, Em. Speak to you soon. You know what? Sometimes you meet people who just make it easy to have a conversation and also inspire you to think differently and learning. And I loved Em's concept of her experiments and her journey and seeing it could be a traveling visit to Australia, see how it works and goes. And so therefore it was a brilliant conversation. But also just when I was listening to her about the thinking she does in the coaching and things she's starting to do about the senior level, it resonates really with a conversation that we're having in our business with our clients about the wider definition of coaching, the wider definition of a conversation at leadership level, how people are having it, how we make it simpler for people to live with that and not only practice it, but sustain that learning and have the identity in that space of a conversation or a coach, depending on the identity you want to take. So fascinating conversation, well worth checking out, checking out the tool Coach M, their non-human member of their team, to see what you think about it. But that was Em Weber, amazing lady. Thanks for listening, and I'll welcome you back in another episode.